Sir, you said that the Russians have uh, used tens of millions of submunitions in Ukraine. I have two questions. Since you've described this as a bridge, how many submunitions is the U.S. now planning to provide to Ukraine, say on a month-to-month basis, given is a bridge? Are you going to be providing millions or hundreds of thousands? How many are you providing? And since the U.S. has been so critical of the Russian employment of cluster munitions, are there any additional steps that you can identify to mitigate the risk to civilians beyond the assurances from the Ukrainians? Is there going to be special training? Is the U.S. going to monitor the dud rates on the battlefield and oversee the areas where they're employed? Are there some specific additional steps the U.S. will take to reduce the risk to civilians?
Thanks, Michael. So I'm not going to go into specific numbers. I will say in my opening statement, I mentioned hundreds of thousands. We have hundreds of thousands of these rounds available below the dud rate threshold that I mentioned, but I'm not going to tip our hand to the Russians about knowing what's coming and what volume when. I will say we're confident that with this inflow of DPICM in combination with the unitary 155 rounds we continue to provide, that the Ukrainians will be able to sustain the artillery fight for the foreseeable future, which I said is not only important in the moment for the counteroffensive, but to signal to Vladimir Putin that he can't just outlast the Ukrainians. Look, I think we have been critical of the Russian use of this, but in large part for two reasons. One, because the Russians have been indiscriminate in their use of all kinds of weapons. They, even their so-called precision guided munitions, fly into apartment buildings and hit schools. And they've been indiscriminate in the usage of cluster munitions as well. They're also using weapons that are much older, with much higher dud rate, and thus much higher risk of collateral damage, even when they're not used indiscriminately. So, as I said before, I think this is kind of an apples to oranges comparison. Beyond the assurances, which I think we should take meaningfully. I mean, in the past, when we have asked the Ukrainians to offer us explicit assurances, they've stuck by those assurances. So I think we should give the Ukrainians the benefit of the doubt. We will, of course, be watching how the Ukrainians use these systems. They will be reporting their usage back to us. And so we can always make judgments later if we feel like those assurances are not being met. But I'm confident that the Ukrainians will be true to their word. I'll also say that, like with every system that we provide the Ukrainians, there will be not just training, but kind of coaching and mentoring associated with this. And I think one of the reasons why the Ukrainians have been so effective in employing the artillery they have had, regardless of system, is that they've received some coaching and mentoring from the United States about the best employment of that. And so we'll continue to do that.